We have a wonderful program outlined for you this morning, and the people that have come here to share their thoughts and ideas with you are people who believe in the things that Senator Lee has been doing for this great state and this country for the last almost 6 years now. I remember when Senator Lee was getting ready to give his victory speech in 2010, and his wife Sharon and Senator Lee were sitting on the couch in their home, and we were talking about what mattered and what should be the signal after victory on that Tuesday in November. And it was Sharon who said, Boston. And we talked about how the original Boston Tea Party was really just a protest against the kind of government that those early patriots did not want. But had they stopped there, what we know as the Boston Tea Party would not even have been a footnote in history. Just one more angry mob upset at a big oppressive government. And then Sharon said, Philadelphia. It took the early patriots 14 years to get from Boston, where they protested against the kind of government that they did not want, 14 years later to get to Philadelphia, where in the Constitution they put down, this is the kind of government, this is the kind of country that we do want. Now, because of the current occupant of the White House, we've had a lot of Boston kind of battles over the last 6 years. We've had to stop a lot of bad government. But the people you're going to hear from today are also going to challenge you to make sure we have a Philadelphia vision of the kind of country we do want. So we do need brave fighters who will stand up for the Boston battles and protest against what we don't want in government. But we've got a group here today led by your Senator Mike Lee who have an extraordinary vision of Philadelphia and what this country can become next. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker today, an extraordinary woman who many of you have gotten to know. There are some people in life who the moment they enter a dialogue, the discussion is elevated. And all of you saw as Carly Fiorina stepped forward. She immediately elevated the dialogue. With a great vision, with her background, not only in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies, but more important, in the living rooms of everyday moms and dads who know what really matters. So please help me give a very big Utah welcome to Carly Fiorina.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You know, you're going to hear later today from two brilliant lawyers, Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. I dropped out of law school. Just to set the record straight, I had the presence of mind to do it before the first exam. And that's why I had to start as a secretary in a little 9-person real estate firm. Now, I want to tell you, I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world for decades. Done business, done charity, done policy work. And when we talk about what's at stake, let me tell you something. It is only in this country that a young woman can start out typing and filing in the middle of a deep recession for a 9-person real estate firm, go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world, and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible here. That is what is exceptional about this nation. And for those who say, nah, this nation isn't really very exceptional, all they need to do is travel the world and read its history. And yet there is so much at stake now. Record numbers of men are out of work. Record numbers of women are living in poverty. Record numbers of young people don't believe the American dream exists anymore. And 80% of the American people think the federal government is incompetent and corrupt. They are right. And that... And 80% of the American people also believe that, guess what? We have a professional political class, the establishment in New York and Washington, D.C., and they care more about the preservation of their own power, position, and privilege than on getting anything done. It's why people are frustrated and fed up. So let's talk about Philadelphia. You know, there are people in this country who think, well, you know, the Constitution is an interesting document, but it's sort of a relic. Let me tell you, I was a philosophy and history major in college. That's why I end up, going to law school. But anyway, that's another story. And here's what I will tell you, having studied philosophy and history. People are pretty much the same. And our founders had this brilliant insight. The insight was, first, that every person is endowed with inalienable rights to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness. What that meant was that every human being has the right to fulfill their potential, to live their dreams. And they said, and this was a radical idea at the time, they said that right comes from God and cannot be taken away by man or government. And so the Constitution was written to enshrine those rights, to protect our individual rights and liberties. But the Constitution was written for another purpose as well. You see, our founders understood the abuse of power. They knew, they had observed what has been true all throughout the eons of time, that when too much power is concentrated in the hands of too few, it is always abused. And so they wrote the Constitution to say there are only certain powers the federal government ought to have, and everything else besides those enumerated powers belongs in the hands of individuals and states and communities, not in Washington, D.C. You see, we have come to a place where too much power, too much economic and political power is concentrated in the hands of too few in New York and Washington, D.C. The system has been in place for far too long, and the system isn't working anymore. And that is why you need people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee fearlessly fighting on behalf of the Constitution. There is a lot at stake in this nation. I know, having challenged the status quo all my life, having challenged the system all my life, it is hard to do so. But it is what leadership is about, because you can't solve festering problems. You can't take power out of the hands of the few and return it to the hands of the many unless you're willing to fearlessly fight. And guess what happens when you challenge that system? You do more than ruffle feathers. You do more than break glass. You make enemies. So yes, I'm proud of the enemies that Mike Lee and Ted Cruz have made, because it says they're fighting for you. Now look, the people of Utah have a really important choice. You have a really important choice to return a fantastic senator so that he can continue the great fight. You have a really important choice on Tuesday as well. Who are you going to make your nominee? Let me tell you something. There you go. Ted Cruz. And Ted Cruz is going to need Mike Lee. He's going to need friends and allies on Capitol Hill to make sure, for example, that we get the right Supreme Court nominee. Because so much is at stake. Our economy is at stake. Our liberties are at stake. You know, there are people who say, well, you know, maybe Donald Trump is going to smash the system. People used to say I was pretty good at taking on Hillary Clinton, and I am. And I'll keep doing it. But let me tell you something, folks. To know Hillary Clinton is to know Donald Trump. They are two sides of the same coin. Hillary Clinton has made her millions of dollars selling access and influence from inside the system, and Donald Trump has made his billions buying people off like Hillary Clinton. They will not fight for the people of this nation. They are the system. They will preserve the system. They will fight for their power, their privilege, their position, not for you. Mike Lee is a fearless fighter. You must return him to the US Senate. Ted Cruz is a fearless fighter. You must send him to the Oval Office. And I am going to close by reminding you what they are fighting for and what you must help them fight for. And I'm going to do that by asking you to think about two of the most powerful symbols of our nation's democracy, because they say everything we need to know about what is at stake in this election. Lady Liberty and Lady Justice. Think for a moment about Lady Liberty. She stands tall and strong, which is the way America must always be. She faces outward into the world. She is clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't shield her eyes from the realities of the world or the realities of our enemies, but she faces outward nonetheless, which is how we must always face, because we must lead in the world, and she holds her torch very high because she knows this nation is a beacon of hope in the world. And think for a moment about Lady Justice, because she tells us all we need to know about this nation as well. She holds a sword by her side because she is a fearless fighter for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in her other hand. And with that scale, she says to us, all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And I believe with that blindfold, she is saying to us, in this nation, in this century, it must be true that it does not matter who you are. It does not matter what you look like. It does not matter how you start. It does not matter your circumstances. Here in this nation, everyone's life must be filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts. And we must be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless you, ladies and gentlemen.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
What do you think, Utah? Carly Fiorina.
Okay. All right. Now, I may have to have you just tone it down a little bit. Senator Lee is not used to this kind of reception when he walks onto the floor of the United States Senate. In fact, the staff usually jokes in Washington that after very, very long days that usually start before the sun comes up and end very close to midnight, that the staff's job is to drop Senator Lee off, pull the arrows out of the front of him, the knives out of the back of him, and say, "Sleep well, sir, we'll do it again tomorrow." Again, we want to thank Carly for her vital voice in this nation and this great debate this year, remembering that if we do not find ourselves as Americans in this election, we're never going to find anybody to lead us where we need to go as a country.